Hey, hello everyone. Good evening and good afternoon, depending on where are you from. I saw a couple of people from Tunisia, States, Poland, Ireland. It's always good to hear where are you all from. Today we have a great speech by Colin. Also, Lais joined as our presenter. My name is Marcin Kosinski. I'm a member of YR Foundation. I'm here just to remind you about YR conference that is happening next week. So those are the slides. Next week, we are starting the conference with a hackathon, and then we will follow with workshops and 2 days of lectures. Thanks to the remote setup of this conference, we were able to gather big names for the conference. So I'm very excited to have all of the great keynotes. If you go to the website, you can see a small agenda that makes you put that on a plan. As you can see, we've got a 24 hours long hackathon that will start with a kickoff by Julia Silch. Then we have a full day of workshops and 2 days of lectures with discussion panels. That's something really cool. We will have a lot of experts on discussion panels trying to discuss the crucial questions at the edge of technology that we are facing right now. Yeah, we still have few seats for workshops, so just visit our website to see the registration URL so that you can still find some seats for the morning and afternoon workshops. And during the workshops, we have a recruiting panel by McKinsey. I'm really looking forward to the insights they gained after 500 interviews for the data science jobs. And lastly, remember about the text mining hackathon. That's free, but requires registration so that we can save the capacity of our mentors and judges. There will be multiple challenges, so you can adjust the level of complexity on your own. So don't be afraid about the text mining hackathon. If you have just a few hours, I think you're gonna find some challenges that will fit you, and you can still get some fun out of it. So yeah, if you will see our YouTube channel, the streams are all set up for the next week, so you can set reminders for those that are the most interesting for you. And yeah, that's all from me. So how do I turn off the share?
We get there. It's all right.
Oh yeah, so many Zooms and streams, and yeah. So passing to Lais, and yeah, guys, have fun during the webinar tonight.
Thank you very much, Marcin, for your introduction, and thank you for the heads up on everything that's going to happen on the conference that starts so soon. Perfect. So hello everyone. My name is Lais. I will be introducing our speaker for tonight. So hello, Colin. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Wonderful. So for everyone, then this is Colin Gillespie. I keep doing this. I'm sorry. We get there one day. I'm sorry. He's gonna reintroduce himself. Perfect. So he's a senior lecturer, associate professor at Newcastle University in the UK. He's an executive editor of the R Journal with research interests including high performance statistical computing and Bayesian statistics. Colin also founded the Jumping Rivers, a consultancy company that has been teaching R since 2005 to all levels, from beginning to advanced programming. Well, welcome, Colin, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen, and hopefully it should all work wonderfully well. Right, so before we begin, we're just having a chat so for the last 10 minutes, and Lais was making a valiant attempt at trying to pronounce my surname, and I can completely understand, because I always mess up names. Myself and names just don't go together. And just before we went live, I said, you know, it's Gillespie because it's Scottish and not Italian. And obviously, just as we switched over, the word Italian stuck in my mind. Also, I was telling Lais that I was really nervous about giving this talk, because it's quite hard, you know, looking at a camera, looking at a monitor, and not getting feedback. And Lais said, don't worry, I've got your back. So if there's any tricky questions, please direct them completely to Lais, and she'll deal with them, no problem. So thank you for joining us. So 1 or 2 slides about me, not too much. So I got roped into writing a book a couple of years ago, Efficient R Programming, with Robin Lovelace. He's down in Leeds. I'm half an academic, so PhD students, teaching, those sorts of things. And I also co-founded Jumping Rivers, the most mysterious startup name ever. And that was started about 4 years ago now. And what we do in the company is we do lots of R and lots of Python, lots of RStudio. So we're one of the few RStudio certified partners. And we do lots of infrastructure and setup and maintenance. And when we started the company 4 years ago, my vision was that we'd be doing lots of cool AI and machine learning and cutting edge stuff. And it's only now that we're sort of getting to that stage with companies. The sort of the interesting part is while most companies say they're doing these advanced things, a lot of them, not all, but many of them are still just sort of finding their feet, and we've been helping them with training and setting up infrastructure and maintenance and looking after what goes on. So that's a little bit of background. So this is my title, me, myself, and my Rprofile. And so the trouble with when you give a talk is the person emails you weeks in advance saying, can you give a title? And so I just gave this title and had an idea of what I was going to talk about. And I thought this sounded quite funny. But I've since changed my mind, which I don't know if that completely messes up this entire YouTube channel. And we'll need a new front page. And I thought, well, I'm going to change it to the Why R Club. So that's what I'm going to change it about to. The reason why I was nervous giving this talk is I'm planning to try and make it interactive. Okay, so I'm going to have a few slides and then jump to R and RStudio and the terminal and trying to do some coding. And I'm really nervous because I can't see anyone's face. So I could jump and then all of a sudden it just goes badly wrong. So I'm going for lots of live coding, lots of demos, clicking on things. The potential for something going wrong is high. When I've tried to time it, this seminar will last somewhere between 20 minutes and 80 minutes. I've got my watch nearby. I'm not sure if Lais will just jump in after 45 and just say, time's up, sit down. But I'm going to find it really hard trying to get a sense of the time. Nope, she's not going to do that. Everybody will just disappear. And this could go really, really well. But if 2020 has taught us anything at all, it's not taught us good things. And I'm based in Newcastle upon Tyne. So Newcastle upon Tyne is in the UK, up in the northeast of England. And we're about to go to a sort of local lockdown again, starting tomorrow. It's not quite full lockdown, but just sort of a mini fun lockdown where kids go to school, but we're not allowed any friends at our house. So far this year hasn't gone the best. But let's hope this talk goes well. So, the Why R Club. Why R's been running for a number of years. So someone chatting to Martin there, and he said it's the 4th year it's been running. And I was wondering, well, what are the rules, right? And I have to be honest, I did do this photoshopping, and I don't know if you can see the hair just sort of seamlessly blended into this picture. So I was quite proud of this bit of photoshopping. It's almost impossible to tell. But we've been doing Why R, Martin and the team have been doing Why R for 4 years. And I've been thinking about what are the rules of this particular club, this organization. So, well, the first rule of Why R Club is, I thought, when I was trying to sit down and think about this, is that we don't know everything. And I think regardless of who you are or your level, no one knows everything. And I think one of the reactions of if ever you have a chance to do a PhD is you suddenly get to that level and realize how little you know about what's going on. And I know that was, during my degree, you sort of think you're doing well and everything's going fine, and you know lots of stuff, and then you go through your PhD and you suddenly realize you know nothing. There's so many smart people in the world, and no matter how good you are, you don't know everything. And I think this sums it up.
I believe, sir, that the doctor is trying to tell you that he is happy because he has finished his book. It has apparently taken him 10 years.
Yes, well, I'm a slow reader myself.
Here it is, sir, the very cornerstone of English scholarship. This book, sir, contains every word in our beloved language.
Oh.
Every single one, sir?
Every single word, sir.
Oh, well, in that case, sir, I hope you will not object if I also offer the doctor my most enthusiastic contrafibularities. Contrafibularities, sir? It is a common word down our way. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I'm anaspeptic, phrasmotic, even compunctious to have caused you such pericombobulation.
So one of the things I've just discovered is when I'm doing these videos, I can't actually hear the sound. So hopefully you heard the sound, but I can't hear the sound. And I don't want to touch anything in case you can't hear the sound. And I think that clip sort of sums it up of, you think you know everything, and then someone comes along and just busts that bubble. So if we don't know everything, the way of trying to learn as much as possible is to sort of beg, borrow, and steal, right? And essentially everything that I'm going to talk about has been stolen from very clever people, right? That's what I've tried to do. Find smart people, follow them on whatever platform you want, and then pick up tips and tricks and try to weave them into what you're doing. So that's sort of my I suppose my whole talk is all these sort of tips and tricks that I've sort of found over the last few years. So the sorts of things that we might sort of beg, borrow, and steal from could be YR talks. So there's a YR talk the other week about workflow R, and again, I sat through and watched it and didn't think it was going to be sort of directly relevant to what I wanted to do, but spending half an hour just downloading the code, running it, gave me a few more ideas for other projects. And just sort of getting used to, you listen to a talk, and let's face it, we're all busy. But if you can just find that sort of 10, 20 minutes just to sort of download it, play about, get some ideas, put them in the back of your mind, and then use them other times, it's really good. Use R groups or data science groups. Again, you just sit there and you're just sort of trying to get new ideas, file them in the back of your mind. They might be useful. Following RStats on Twitter is quite good. Slightly embarrassing. So I've got a Twitter account, CS Gillespie, which is not the most popular of Twitter accounts. And I finally got a popular tweet, and it was me being incredibly grumpy and moany, which is rather embarrassing. And so I wrote a little R function to start muting anyone in RStats who uses more than 5 hashtags. And rather embarrassingly, this was the most popular tweet I've ever done, is me being grumpy and moany. In my defense, it does actually work and it cleans out. So I apologize if you use more than 5 hashtags, but you've now been muted in my timeline. Not that you're probably bothered, but yeah. Lots of blogs, so try and follow blogs. This is the Jumping Rivers blogs. So these are the sorts of things that we've been blogging about for the last few months. So the one on the left, the bizarre oyster with a patch over his eye, is a package we've been working with a company called Sonotype, and that's for looking at vulnerabilities in R packages. So if you go to that blog post, it'll tell you how to run a little R package, a little R script that will scan your system and see, do you have any R packages that contains known vulnerabilities? And then there's another blog post on continuous integration. Plug for next week's YR workshop. We're doing a workshop in Travis. And then Stack Overflow as well. Okay, do you find that, looking up questions, we go to Stack Overflow all the time. Here, I would suggest, and again, it's down to time, we're all busy. Rather than always following the top answer, if you can find time just to spend 5 minutes looking at the second answer, the third answer, finding out what's best, why one's better than other in your circumstance, is a really good way of learning. The second rule of YR Club is own your RStudio options. Okay, so I'm going to assume that most people use RStudio. If you use Emacs, then I'll assume that you do this already and you have some horrendous Emacs file with more curly brackets than you can count. So if you use Emacs, great, but I'm just going to think about RStudio. So this is where I'm going to go for a little demo. So what do I mean by RStudio options? Right. This is just my little note, so don't forget anything. So by RStudio options, what I mean is you're going to tools and you're going to global options, okay? And you come up with a whole bunch of different options. I'm not going to go through every single option here because that's just a bit tedious. But again, the next time you have 5 minutes, have you ever clicked down them? Have you ever sort of looked at them, seen what's going on? Okay, so what sort of things should you click or unclick? So I think the number one thing I would recommend is you should never ever restore R data into your workspace at startup. So this option here. Okay, I'll unclick that. Lais, can you see my cursor? I can't figure out if people can see my cursor.
Yes, if you could make it a little bit bigger, that would be awesome.
I don't know how to make my cursor a little bit bigger, and I don't think I can make this a bit bigger.
Well, like,
So,
here we go. Oh.
yeah, so not helpful in the slightest from me, sorry, but yeah. Okay, so don't ever restore your R data. So what that means is when you end an R session, by default, you typically store your R data, and that's just bad, right? You almost never want to do that. So one of the first things we did consultancy was trying to help a very large company speed up the R workflow. And they were loading up RStudio, and it was just grinding to a halt. And what's actually happening was they had been downloading lots of large data sets into the R data set, into the R data file. And every time they started up R, it took them like 60 seconds to start because it's loading in these sort of tens of megabytes worth of data, even though they weren't needed. It's also got a reproducibility issue, right? So I've definitely come across lots of people who use that to store data. That's just scary. So don't ever do that. Also tend to like to remove duplicates from history. So I don't like that. And when I was going through it today, yep, that's it. So the other thing that I quite like is under code and display, showing the margin. So that's a little line going down. Okay, so you've got a little vertical line, and I use it 100 columns. Now you might think, well, I quite like text wrapping, so that's where the text wraps line after line. And that's nice visually, but it's a bit of a pain on the Git. So, you know, it makes your Git diffs really horrible. So I tend to truncate, make sure none of my lines ever go over 100. And at Jumping Rivers, we actually have CI jobs that make that enforce that rule. So being able to view that column is also really handy. Saving. Ensure that source files end with new lines. Okay, so we want that one ticked. The reason why you want that ticked is there's lots of functions that read in files that would then give a warning message if you don't have a new line on the end. You also want to strip trailing horizontal white space when saving. The reason for that, again, is more to do with Git. You know, when you're merging changes, having a little white space, it sort of tweaks is just a pain, you know, so you don't really want that. Display. And I'm just trying to look, this is where it's. Oh. Also go for tentacle for text encoding under UTF-8, just makes your code a bit more portable. And then under diagnostics, I tend to quite like RStudio to show some of these R diagnostics. Again, if you've never visited this little pane, it's worth just spending a few minutes going through, clicking some buttons, seeing what it's got. Of course, you should uncheck the check that you're using this arrow in the function call, because clearly the equality sign is far superior to any of the sort of the arrow nonsense that people try to use. So that's another thing. Pane layout. Something that I find really useful, I think most people do, is that we typically have a widescreen monitor, right? So my monitor is widescreen. And the two panes that I want to see at any time in RStudio would be the source. So that's this thing up in the top left-hand corner. So that's my code. And then on the right-hand side, I want to see the console. So that's where I'm going to execute code. Whereas by default, the console's in the bottom left-hand window. So typically you'd want sort of source on the left, console on the right, and then you're using that as that to the sort of the fullest advantage of your monitor. So you have quite a big screen. What else? One last one, it's appearance. Okay. And this is actually one of the few sort of options that we cover in a sort of introduction to our course. You know, so on day one, after the first 30 minutes, we get people to open up the introduction to our course, because this thing here, the font size is really, really important. Okay. So the default is probably never the best in all situations. So depending on what computer I'm on, the default goes from sort of 11 when I'm on a large monitor at work, down to about sort of 12 or 13 when I'm on my laptop, When I'm training, it might go up to about 16, so I could make that a bit bigger, and that's better for training. Font as well. Again, you should change your font, have a little look through. So the font I've got is JetBrains Mono, right? And that doesn't come with RStudio, but you can download it. So JetBrains Mono. So if you do a quick Google for JetBrains Mono, you come up with a very trendy web page in fonts. I don't know much about fonts, but this just looks cool and trendy. And it tells you all about why JetBrains Mono is better and wonderful and all sorts of things. But I find it quite nice. And you can sort of click through about the sort of the different way it looks. So regardless if you want JetBrains Mono, you should just spend a bit of time going through changing your font, right? Find one that suits your eyes. Your eyes are important. You're not likely to get another set anytime soon. So make sure your font is the right size. Make sure your font size is the right, it's good for you, and make sure your font is nice. I quite like this one because there's ligatures. So if you notice, it's got the sort of the cool little arrow going on here. So I quite like that one. And then you should change your editor theme. And I quite like Dracula, partly because it's got a cool name and partly because I like the colors. Okay, so you should definitely spend time just sort of going through these things, having a little play about, seeing what's there and tweak them to your liking. Right, back to so third rule, use your Rprofile, which the sharp-eyed amongst us will notice that was my original title, and that's what was had in the back of my head for when I was giving this talk. So what's an Rprofile? Well, when R starts, right, so when you sort of launch RStudio, when you launch R, what R does is it looks for a site-wide configuration file, okay? Almost certainly you won't have one, right? If you work in an office that's quite up and doing sensible things in R, then you might have one, but just installed in your laptop, you're not likely to have a site-wide R configuration file. One of the things we do at Jumping Rivers is we'd set up the infrastructure so we can standardize options across multiple users, but most people don't have that. After it looks at this site-wide configuration file, it will then look for an r.rprofile in your current working directory. Okay, the dot means it's a hidden file, right? So typically, if it's got a dot, it's A, hidden, which means you can't see it automatically, and B, it's a configuration file. And if it doesn't find anything in step 2, then it will check your home directory. Okay, so for me, that's /home/ncsg3. Okay, so the rather bizarre thing is, or not bizarre, but things that can catch you out is, if it finds something at step 2, it won't look for step 3. Okay, and that again can be quite handy because it means you can have a per Rprofile for each project. So you might put that on Git. And then if there's a team of people working, you're all working the same thing. Okay, so my Rprofile is definitely the best for me. I'm going to put in brackets, right? And what I'm going to describe is my Rprofile that won't be best for you, but hopefully will give you some ideas. And it's on GitHub at my repo. Oh. So it's on my repo, CS Gillespie /Rprofile. So what does this look like? And I'll put that link back up at the end, so don't worry. So let's go for what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to launch a bog standard R terminal, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm now in R, okay, and it's just on the console, so it's without RStudio, so it's no different to what you would normally use. R-vanilla is quite a handy option when you're trying to debug, because what it's telling R is don't bother with any startup files, okay? So it's a vanilla setup, a plain setup without any configuration, right? So this is bog standard R, no different to what you'd normally use. And then on another tab, I'm just going to launch R normally, okay? So what's going on here? Well, this is bog standard R, and you're getting the cursor and it's flashing, you're getting a little arrow. Well, here I've sort of customized a few different things, right? All my customizations came because of some problem I've had. So I have when R starts, it reads what Wi-Fi signal I'm connected to and the strength. So green's good. And the reason why I've got this here is because I used to, before COVID, travel all the time on the train down to London, and Wi-Fi was going on and off, and then you're getting on, but you had to sign on. So that was a very good way when I was messing about and off, just figuring out what the Wi-Fi signal was like. Was I connected? Was I not connected? And then I've also got a little tick saying I'm connected to the Ethernet. So I've got a wired connection. So that gets printed out each time I load R. And then I've also got a little function that tells me the number of R sessions that are running, right? And the reason why I've got that is because I run lots and lots of jobs, and then every so often I think I've killed everything, and I launch R, and it's saying that I've got 5 R sessions running about, and so that's going, oh, something bad is gone, so I go and find them and try and kill them. Okay, so that's one step Rprofile. What else have I got? Well, back to bog standard R. So if I type the function lm, I get what you'd normally expect. You know, you're outputting all the function, and it's the usual stuff, you know, the lm definition. Under my Rprofile, I've got it all nice, and it all looks pretty with nice colors, and it's nicely paginated, so I can just sort of scroll up and down, unlike here where it's very sort of messy and I get white space. So that's just a bit nicer. A little bit of customization for the help page. So here's LM for the help page under vanilla. Here's the help page under linear models for under my setup. So again, it's just not massively different, but just the font's a little bit nicer. It's got syntax highlighting. It's got all, it understands markdown. So if you notice here, where's it? Right down the bottom, we've got some comments. So when we go down the bottom here in comments, it's all nice in italics. Here we've got some stuff in bold and some stuff in italics. So it's just a bit nicer. Again, I'll give links at the end of the talk so you can see how all this is done under my Rprofile. It's not particularly amazing. I've just stolen other people's ideas. So at the end of this talk, you'll get links to how to do all this if you want. And all this just makes sort of day-to-day R a bit nicer. You know, for me, I'm typically in R most of the day. Well, R in meetings, that's how I spend my day. And just these sort of little minor tweaks of making the help pages look a bit nicer helps my eyes, making the fonts look a bit nicer helps my eyes. It's all just sort of there to help my eyes. Other thing that it's got, well, let's see, if I go to one of my repositories, so, and I can type. So we do lots of training. So this is some notes. So here, what I've just done beforehand was I changed directory to one of our training courses. And if you notice that my R prompt has now changed, okay. So my R prompt is actually telling me that I'm in the Git repository and I'm on the branch C5-changes. Okay. So again, that's very handy for when you're working with Git or SVN and you're doing some changes, and it's quite easy to sort of mix up branches and do something somewhat silly. Right? So again, it's just sort of a little visual clue where you don't have to do anything, and it tells you that something's going on. So if I went back to master and went back into R, now it's saying I'm in master branch. Okay, and that's again quite nice. And you can get a little up arrows and down arrows to say if you're ahead of the branch or head of the repo or behind the repo. I'm now just going to take a 2-second pause while I turn the lights on because it's got dark in here. Sorry, there we go. Right. We've had evening time in the UK. So that's quite nice. Right. And again, we just like these things to happen. It's just to try and stop me from doing something silly, to which I tend to do lots of silly things. What else is there? So jumping back onto RStudio, there's lots of nice little functions that I've sort of added in, again, stolen from other very clever people. So for example, if I do remove, I'm just going to remove a package. So if I do try and load a package, say drat, then it's just saying drat's not installed, trying to install now, installing drat. Drat installed and loaded. So what I've got is a little function that overloads the library function that if a package isn't installed, then it tries to load it for me. So that's quite nice. I have a whole bunch of options that I change at the start. So this is file. Again, links will be at the end, but just to sort of show you the stuff that you can change. So the sorts of stuff is, I don't like displaying lots of digits, so I just only display 4. I don't like those significant stars, so I don't display them. I specify the number of CPUs. So NCPUs allows you to download, allows you to install packages in parallel. So if you do install.tidyverse, it's got lots of dependencies. NCPUs allows you to do that in parallel. And so I've just got a little bit of code that makes in parallel. Max print 100. So if you've ever printed out a data frame, seeing the first 1,000 rows tends not to be the most useful experience, shall we say. So again, limited to 100. HTTP user agent, download file extra. These are all those 2 things that are useful for RStudio package manager that we use at Jumping Rivers. So there's lots of little options that we can tweak. So that's all quite nice. At Jumping Rivers, we use make a lot. So a make file is just a file with lots of sort of pre-canned commands. So I've got a little function inside RStudio, inside my Rprofile, and all that does is it scans, it sees if there's a make file in my directory. If there's a make file in the directory, it automatically creates a whole bunch of functions starting with the word make. So if I go back to my repo, I've now got a whole bunch of make underscore functions, because inside that directory, I have a make file with functions called clean, cleaner, default, feedback, GitLab check. Okay, so I can automatically just call make, these make functions from the command line. Okay, if you don't use make, don't worry about that. Okay, I've got lots of little things for RStudio projects, so I get really bored of sort of clicking on these things here, you know, sort of going up, you know, who can do that. So I've got a little function called CP, and so I can choose the RStudio project I want, right? So I put in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I've got lots of little tweaks to do with that. And then I use a startup package right at the end. So startup's another package not run by me, but it just sort of makes sure your Rprofile is correct. So again, links at the end of the talk to all these different bits and pieces. Something I tend to avoid is adding messages to my startup. So when I first started messing about with this years ago, I used to be quite cute and have the little grab the last tweet from RStats, because I thought it was quite cool, until I took the train to London and the internet went by carrier pigeon. And so all of a sudden starting R up took forever, and it was because I was trying to be clever. So now I try to avoid anything to connect to the internet. So all this stuff I've talked about doesn't involve internet connection. It just involves reading little files here and there. And again, this is all in a repository, cs.gillespie/rprofile. It's very easy to break this stuff. Okay, so if you're messing about with the Rprofile and you break it, well, this is some good advice.
Hello, IT.
Something's wrong with my computer.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
No. Oh dear, thanks.
You're welcome, mate. Hello, IT.
Try turning it off and on again and nothing happens.
Is it definitely plugged in?
Let me have a look. Oh, sorry, that's it. Thanks very much.
You're welcome, mate.
So yeah, try turning it off and on again. Try restarting. If you have messed up your Rprofile, you can always delete it and just start again. So it's not a big deal, but it's quite a good way of learning. 4th rule, learn to use a terminal. So by this, I mean this terminal here. All right, so you might have a little Linux terminal. I think, you know, I'm not talking about becoming an expert at it, but just not being frightened by it. Right. So the question you might have is, why would we need to learn this? Well, it's quite useful, I think, learning different views. So you might be an expert R programmer, but learning sort of a different programming language, a different system, gives you a different point of view, different ideas that you could then pull in. You can interact with sort of cloud machines much more easily. So there's a tweet by Henrik Ingerson a few days ago, and because it's quite easy to sort of get used to running things through IDEs, we then, when we sort of move to cloud or move to a high performance cluster, we sort of think we need our IDE, whereas actually with a few bits of command line love, you can get what you need very easily. So just sort of being able to not just sort of have a little feel, know how to sort of move around a terminal, it's a very useful skill. Docker, if you want to start messing about with Docker, then you need a little bit of sort of command line. And it also makes you a bit more employable, right? Again, I'm not talking about becoming an expert here. I'm just talking about having an awareness of how this stuff works, just that very sort of quick view. So the sorts of things I'm thinking about, that you should have or you should think about is, and again, you might, once you start using this, you start seeing similarities with R. So there's an ls function, okay? ls is short for listen. It shows you your files and your command. You might have a cd, or not might have, there's a cd function. So cd is change directory, so I can change directory to another directory. Okay. There's a move function, okay? So I've just moved a file. And then there's an rm function where I could delete a function if I wanted. And really, once you've sort of got those 4 commands, it makes it much nicer of just being able to sort of go up and down directories, creating some files, deleting some files, moving some files. And then once you've got that, you start thinking, well, I've got ls, but how do I just start viewing all the RMD files? Oh, here's how I view all the RMD files. Oh, I've got the RMD files. How do I zip just the RMD files, but not other things? And that sort of starts you going down other little avenues to explore. So it's a very good way of just sort of learning what's going on. The 5th rule, experiment, right? So I use the RStudio preview version. Just Google RStudio preview. If you're brave, and I'm not that brave, you could use the RStudio dailies version. So that's the sort of the latest version running up every day. Or you could use the R dev version. How do you install the latest version of R that's not been sort of bundled up? How do you do that? How do you switch between what you're currently using to the dev version? Again, very good learning exercises, teach you lots of things. Try new things. So if you use test that, have you ever tried tiny test? You could probably get your head around it in under half an hour. If you use data table, have you ever tried dplyr? If you use string R, have you tried grep? Right? All these things, if you use one of them, using the other, spending half an hour gives you so much more insight, seeing how, again, other clever people write some code and sort of getting the best practices. You could even try Python. I know that's a bit controversial, but you could try Python. And if you use Travis, well, have you tried GitHub Actions? Have you tried Circle CI? Have you tried, something else? Again, just getting another little view of how things work really helps your workflow. I think the most important thing is don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to sort of mess about.
Oh my gosh. It's a robot. I've never seen one in the wild before. Where'd you come from, fella? Huh? Where'd you come from? Can we keep him, Roy? I mean, if he doesn't belong to anyone.
I just don't understand what it's doing. I mean, this is weird. What is it? Moss?
What?
Get away from it.
Why? Hello, Jen! It's a robot!
Get away!
What?
Get away! Get away from it! There's a bomb!
What are you saying?
There's a bomb in the bag!
I think this might be a bomb disposal robot, Roy.
Hang on!
We should move away from it.
Yes, we should. But I don't seem to be able to move.
What?
Okay, well, I suppose bad things can happen. So the final rule, so we're almost finished, is think of the children. And by children, what I really mean is new R users. So one of the key things to remember is being come up with really fancy and clever ways. But if you're ever involved in training or ever working with other people, you should always start with something like this, you know, bog standard RStudio or bog standard R, and then take them through. So one of the things I've learned is when you're doing an introduction course, always make sure you try and match environments, no matter how fancy and how clever. People have got too many other things to try and understand. So yeah, always make sure you have that sort of backup of a nice clean system. So summary, optimizing your setup. I think it saves you significant time. Okay, you know, you're loading R, well, I'm loading R all the time. You know, the amount of time I've saved just being able to view the Wi-Fi signal popping up my R terminal is unbelievable. You know, you don't have Wi-Fi, but you can't install a package. It gives you new skills. Okay, so, you know, coming up with these little toy things, you know, just when I thought, well, I wonder how I can find what the Wi-Fi signal strength is. You know, it's a little half-hour project, nothing too complicated, but a little bit of Googling, a little bit of Stack Overflow, and it's given me new skills, new insights, and I can sort of work a bit better. Makes coding more fun. Okay, you know, it's just a bit nicer looking at pretty things. It makes your eyes a bit nicer. These are some GitHub links. So the first one is pointing to a little package, my Rprofile, that sort of details all the stuff I showed you about, sort of the makefile options, the options that I set, and all the other bits and pieces. It's reasonably well documented. The other one was just one I started, and that's dot files. So dot files are these sort of configuration files, and I'm just sort of gradually moving them over. So my Rprofile's there, my R environment's there, some of my bash files are there, if you know what bash is, and I'm gradually sort of moving them all there, and I'll start documenting them. So thank you very much. I hope you found it useful, and I hopefully have some nice questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I can hear myself on an echo a little bit.
I've just turned myself down.
You mean me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Well, we have some people saying on the chat, I don't know if you're following the YouTube chat, but we have some people saying that they liked your book.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk. That was very cool. I thought it was very impressive that you changed the talk on the second slide as well. But live coding is always a little bit of, uncertain.
Yeah, it's always a bit scary.
Yeah, but you managed. Very good. Perfect. So I have a few questions for you here. First of all,
you answer them if I can't answer. Put my back.
I can try an answer related to Python. Would that be okay?
That'd be fine.
Okay. Cool. So let's start then with something quite simple. What's your favorite R package?
So I quite like, so the little package I removed and then reinstalled was a little package called drat, which is, it's used for creating R repositories, so sort of creating local cran-like systems. And that was the one that we sort of started, sort of, I suppose, jumping rivers and how to install system dependencies when we were going around. So it's just a very simple little package. It's only got half a dozen functions, and it just allows you to create your own little R repository and allow install.packages to work on your own local machine, which is quite cool. It's quite nice.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about jumping rivers then. And so you co-own Jumping Rivers, right?
Yep.
And it's a data science consulting company.
Yes.
Perfect. Now, we can overlap a little bit with COVID. And do you want to tell me maybe how is it to run a data science consultancy company during lockdown?
I suppose it's stressful as every other job and everyone else. So as a company, we were always distributed. So we're based in the UK, and there's sort of 10, 12 of us. So it's currently 10, but we're just finalising interviews for another 2 people. And we're based throughout the UK, so we always worked remotely. And we always did a bit of travelling, so people could live where they wanted, but we always had to go to London and Edinburgh and Glasgow, sort of the main hubs in the UK and in Europe as well. So that part was fine because we had all the tools and facilities to work remotely. We do a lot of training, and so week 1 of lockdown, one of our trainers gave what we would normally do as an on-site course online, so we all sat, the 9 of us sat, well, he gave us for 3 hours. And normally, well, he always gives a brilliant course and he always gets 5 out of 5, and he gave the best course ever. And it was so boring just watching it online, it was just so dull. So we then spent about a month of full-time work redoing all the courses to make them run online, to make them work. It's not just a bunch of slides that you then just talk through and pretend you're in the room, because no matter how good you are, that's boring. And so that was the biggest challenge of just spending that month putting all this stuff and making it work, which, we sort of did our own A/B testing, and we were all quite fun with each other of, yes, that worked, no, that was awful, let's fix it. So overall, everything's much better. All the courses have improved, but that was a massive amount of work that we didn't expect.
So let me ask you a follow-up question on that then. So how is the workflow of giving those courses set up now? So like, what do you use to do the interaction of the actual code writing?
So when we did our demo, so it was not just the data scientists, it was also sort of the people who sort of do the more admin. And I won't mention the person's name, but she was great. Of every 5 minutes, she said, I've lost my Zoom account. How do I get into Zoom again? How do I get into RStudio? That sort of, and you could sort of say, can you just deal with that? But that very quickly became, well, that's what's going to happen. So now we would send participants one URL, and with that single URL, they can generate a username and password that would allow them to go onto a Google Doc, allow them to access RStudio Pro. It would allow them to generate a username and password, so they just need a single URL, and that's it. Everything else is seamless. All the notes, R scripts are automatically added to RStudio server. So everything is just there, because participants can't do anything. And it's impossible to debug over the internet, when you've got a room of 10 people.
Yeah.
So, and we also made all our courses much more interactive. So none of the courses now have sort of the traditional slides and talking. It's much more interactive, but then that means whilst it might look like the trainer's doing it off the cuff and on the fly, and it's not scripted, clear, series of steps that everyone has to follow to make it all work. And rather amusingly, feedback has been better on online training than we got on site, and we did very well on site. But we just spent so much time and effort making it perfect, because we thought we've got one shot at this. Companies won't come back. So it's worked out well.
Nice. And so you don't use any cloud-based notebooks to run your courses then, like CoCalc or Azure's notebook with machine learning support for R, nothing like that?
We use Jupyter notebooks. We're using some R Markdown notebooks. Again, even for that, it was trying to figure out if R Markdown is really easy, but depending on what level, if you're trying to figure out everything else, is R Markdown just one step too far? So we're now, sort of gradually building them in, but only to later courses, just trying to keep the minimum. So we use sort of the standard Jupyter notebooks. Typically, most of the training we're doing is not at that sort of level. The sort of the more AI advanced stuff would be sort of 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, not the sort of the class-based stuff.
Okay, so that way it gets a little bit easier to debug, just like sharing your screen and the chat.
But the questions are a lot harder. It's no longer I've missed off a comma.
Well, because that's spotted easily, like that. There is no fun on that. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I have a new question. So how good is the collaborative editing on RStudio Server Pro, since you're talking about that?
That's an interesting question. So if I was to pay for RStudio Server Pro and we use it, that wouldn't be the feature that would kill me. There's other features that are better. So, being able to switch between our version is sort of the killer feature for me. The editing works very well. The editing works really nicely. Depending on your organization, you might be better with Slack, if you're already using Slack.
Mm-hmm.
But what we've tended to do when we're sort of doing that as a team is more paired programming. So very much over the last sort of month or two, someone would be live coding, and so they have to sort of talk to the other person in the team saying, and now I'm going to do this. And it's much more pair programming. And we could sort of jump in and type, but actually getting the person to explain what they're doing and then being able to explain verbally what you want is a bit more challenge. So the tools are very good, but we typically use sort of other stuff.
Okay. Well, I hope this answered your question. And then I have another cool question for you here. So I want to know the relationship between statistics and data science, because I know you're involved with statistical computing in the Royal Statistical Society. So yeah, do you think they're like very divergent fields? Do you think that statisticians actually get data science?
Do you think that data scientists get statistics?
I don't know. That's the question for you. You're gonna decide now.
So it's a half an academic, so in a stats department, and then sort of in academia. I know that when data science first came out, what's that? It feels ages ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It was very looked down on that's just statistics. You're doing some programming, you're doing some maths, and you need domain knowledge, but that is what a statistician is. I would say now that view has changed, and most, not by any means all, but many statisticians would see the difference. And I tend to think of stereotypes. So if I want a statistician, I want someone who can analyze a clinical trial, who knows about ANOVA tables, who knows about effect size, who knows about random effects models, who knows about p-values. If I want a data scientist, I'm wanting someone that knows about APIs, someone that understands databases, someone that can do perhaps log onto a cloud server. Not to say that a statistician can't do that, not to say that a data scientist can't do the other thing, but that's what I think that sort of stereotypical view would sort of works quite well. Also works quite well when you think about AI. You say I'm looking for someone to do AI, then you automatically think of massive data sets with vision and pictures and movies. And it's not that statisticians don't do that, and it's not that data scientists don't do that, but that sort of stereotype, I think, is more the type of person you're after.
Okay. That was clear enough. Oh, thank you for that. And then, so yeah, I heard that Saturdays in Newcastle was cancelled due to COVID.
Yeah.
How are the plans for that for next year?
So I think we cancelled it maybe 3 weeks before, and then a week after we cancelled it, lockdown happened. So it was we made the right decision. But I remember at the time thinking of, with hindsight, it was blatantly obvious what was going to happen. But at the time, well, who'd have guessed? So I think we're going to go ahead with Saturday's Newcastle in April, but just going virtual. So just going to cheat and just saying we're going to make it a virtual event, and rather than sort of have the half and half, and it might be virtual and it might be on site, of just saying it's going to be virtual and we'll do it that way. I'm not quite sure the best way of doing it, so I need to chat with the rest of the organising committee. Do we just do it the same again, or do we just go for half a day and pick up a few keynote speakers, or do we go local? So I've not decided what, but I think we'll definitely go ahead, but it will be virtual just to take stress away from ourselves.
Okay, yeah, organizing an online event, it seems easier, but it's not. It's more work. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, do you want to tell me how to use Docker in your workflow?
So we use it all the time. So the sort of the process of when we give a course is, someone would say they're giving a course on tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and that little tag is put into Asana, which is like Trello, sort of Trello Asana, and then we've got a little job that runs it that picks that up automatically sort of creates a container for that course. That course has got an R package dependency, and then automatically sort of fires the Docker container, which is just like a big box that contains the RStudio infrastructure up to the cloud, and then we run the course. So we sort of use it a lot, but it's all very automated, you know. So literally you just sort of say, I'm giving a course tomorrow, and then the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, this RStudio service sitting there waiting for someone to use, with usernames and passwords and notes all installed. One of the issues we found, so we've lots of people who work at Jumping Rivers love R and love tinkering, and trying to sort of get them to do the day job is nigh on impossible, because they like just sort of messing about with cool things. And so my job is essentially to make them finish the cool things. You know, you can play about and do all these cool workflows, but you just need to make it sure it works and we can use it. So we end up have as much automation as you can possibly imagine. Everything is automated, and it uses Docker all the time.
That's awesome. I actually want to talk to you after this then about automation, because I need to do some stuff. I'll pick your brain. Then so I have a last question for you, because we're almost hitting the hour there. So yeah, it's going to be a question about Bayesian statistics, because I know that's one of your main areas of research. Yep. So could you give like a quick run through to young data scientists on like Bayesian statistics, and like how do you pick that up, and how important is after your career? You choose how you answer this one. Go ahead.
So Bayesian statistics is essentially where you have the idea of using past data to input into your model. Okay, so you sort of have a prior, which is what you believe. So traditionally, without looking at the data, you'd form a prior in what you believe. And this used to be incredibly controversial. So, you know, if you go back to sort of the founders of this and look at the correspondence, let's say they would fail all codes of conduct ever since written. So they were very, very forthright in their views, might be one way of saying it, along the lines of this person is stupid, don't listen to them. Because it was just such a controversial idea of having, you know, you're having a view and that should impact on what you're going to do. And now it's turned out to be incredibly important, you know. So Bayesian statistics comes into all fields. So spam filters are essentially, you know, sort of using Bayesian ideas where you're sort of telling, you know, you've got a whole bunch of prior ideas of what you think words shouldn't appear in your emails, and then it's automatically updated, and that's sort of using Bayesian statistics, this idea of updating your beliefs, to running a lot of surveys. So Bayesian statistics, I think the one company UK that predicted Brexit correctly based on opinion polls was using a very Bayesian model, because it was able to sort of pull data in a nice, sensible way and pull in sort of prior beliefs about what's going on, as opposed to sort of just trying to sample everyone at once. So it's important, but lots of things are important. So it's not a 5-minute job of I'll read Wikipedia. It's a big topic.
Okay, but I think that was a good overall explanation. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And again, thank you very much for joining us. We're so happy to have you here. We're so happy to have your live demo with us.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you very much to everyone watching. Thank you for everyone that posted questions. And yes, Marcin, would you like to say your last words as well, or we're all good?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for the presentation. This was a gold mine, and I'm looking forward to having a look at your Rprofile repository. Those who were absent should feel guilty that they didn't have a chance to hear to all this wisdom. So thank you for joining, Colin, tonight.